Having assembled the basic components of our creation from hand-milled stock, I'm really glad to see that you've returned to watch the piece really take shape. Let's take the blank and find the indication of the seam. Mark a center point at the seam with a scribe. Then, using steel dividers, eyeball a reasonable distance for the split to travel down the shank on each side of the center point. We'll close the dividers to what looks like about half the width of the shank, then run from mark to mark. Do this on each side of the shank, and even if the first line is not dead center, the second creates a tight, clear path for a saw blade to follow. I typically start a line all the way across holding the blank in my hand, but a beginner just should not do this. To lessen the chance of injury, we'll cut the main depth and length using a ring clamp to secure the piece. With a clear, even slice down through about a third of our blank, we take a small screwdriver and begin to pry open the split. Just a little. Now, let's run the saw blade through the very first joint we made. This allows us to open the split a little wider with flat nose pliers. On the mandrel, we separate the split forks to exactly the finger size requested by our patron. Exacting measurements here can actually throw us off our game a bit. Remember, the stone and its bezel are asymmetrical, and as such, we're much better off estimating these dimensions, guided by what appears to be a central fit. Placing our bezel over the split forks, we mark the ends for trimming. Once the ends are trimmed, a small amount of tension holds the bezel right in place, allowing us to flow our first attachments. These joints look good, right? Wrong. Here's the real secret to a strong attachment. Using a finer 08 saw blade, we'll zip through each of these joints to fit them perfectly. Do both joints on each side at a time so you can close them back to the bezel easily together while the components are held in place by the attachments on the other side. Next, we need to round out the bottom of the bezel. It is important for comfort that the inside of our ring be completely circular. We'll strike the piece with a rawhide mallet first to effect the general shape, then with a chasing hammer we tap until every inside surface is flush against the mandrel. Next, take the dividers, adjusted to a narrow gap, and make 2 sets of marks on each side of the ring at a pre-measured spot. Still using the finer saw blade, we cut laterally across the split forks at each mark. We're not cutting through here, just making a line. So stop when the blade reaches its own depth into the metal. These grooves are widened using a triangular needle file. With the dividers closed a little more, we'll make 2 marks on the longest section of each split fork. Because the shape of this ring will not allow me to use a saw blade in making these lines, I'll use a graver. Here, I like to use the corners of a flat graver instead of a knife edge, because the corners of the flat produce a nice, bright 90-degree trough. Some people prefer to use a powered graver. Personally, I like the old-fashioned manual type. Either way, the key to proper graver use is a sharp tool. Now, if we do this right, we'll produce a design that is somewhat reminiscent of a Greek or Roman architectural column.
We're just a few steps away from completing our project. Don't miss the final results in just a moment.